buckle up, y'all. This lesson's going to be a little bit longer, but this one's going to be really exciting. I know that I keep saying that everything's exciting, but I just love everything. Programming's just so cool. But this is actually a really cool one. In this video, we're going to be learning about classes, and classes are just another one of those super foundational parts of programming. And in fact, these are so core to programming that there's actually no way that you can even develop an iOS app without them. They're just so important, and they're really cool. They're very powerful things. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. Let's do another playground. And what am I going to name this one? I should have thought about this before. Class is in session. God, they're so cringy, right? I know, so bad. Anyways, okay, so we're going to create a couple classes here. Let's start with what a class is. So a class is just an object that has properties and knows how to do things. Man, probably couldn't have given you a more generic explanation than that, huh? Well, we're going to see what that looks like. So basically, a class is like it says, it's just going to be any object that you want to do things with. So for example, a class might be like a worker, and that's actually the first example that we're going to put here. By worker, I literally mean just a human worker, or maybe we could call it a professional or whatever you want to call it. So a worker is a human being that does a job, and we want to represent that in our code. And then maybe we want to have some what we would call subclasses of that would be like doctor or software engineer or lawyer or whatever. We can have all sorts of different subclasses of that parent class. So you're probably like, oh my God, this is so confusing. You're overwhelming me. I just want to see what you're talking about. So let's go ahead and just do it. Let's create our first class and let's call it worker. And we'll put these little braces here. And for the first time in the whole time we've been doing this, you're probably seeing, wow, there's no errors. And that would be correct. There is no errors yet. This is totally okay. But this is just an empty class that doesn't know how to do anything. It's not very smart. And we don't want our workers to not be smart. We want them to be very smart. So we need to give them more stuff to do. So anyways, let's go ahead and create some properties of this class. Properties of a class can either be constants or they can be variables. We've obviously been getting familiar with both of those. So if you'll recall, a constant is something that you cannot change once it's set, and a variable is something that can change all the time. So I'm going to assume that the average worker on the planet can definitely change certain properties about themselves. So maybe the first property would be job title. And as you well know, this is definitely going to change throughout a human's lifetime. So we also need to set the type. This is important on classes. Unless you're going to provide a default value, which I'll show you in just a minute, we're always going to have to provide the type of the property, unlike everything else. Remember, I was telling you before that inferred types are the preferred way of doing things in Swift. But on a class, that's really not an option unless you provide a default value. Then it can infer the type. But in general, with classes, I'd say more often than not, you're not providing a default value. So we would actually need to tell it what type it is. And to do that, you'll probably recall is colon and then the type. So a job title would be a string. Obviously, we would want this to be a piece of text. Go ahead and ignore this for right now. We'll cover this here in a minute. Let's go ahead and add a couple more properties. Maybe salary. That's an important one. And a salary could probably be expressed as, it could be an int or a double, but I'm going to say usually it's not a decimal number. Usually your salary is going to be like $60,000 a year or $100,000 a year or $1 million a year. It's never going to really be like $60,000.50. That's probably not going to happen. So we'll go ahead and make this an int. So we've got title, salary, and let's go ahead and add one more, and we'll say job description. Okay, so we've got three properties here, job title, description, and salary. So now what the compiler is complaining, or what Xcode is complaining about, is that we don't have an initializer. So basically what an initializer is a way for us to fill in the values of this worker class. And what that looks like is we write the word init, and if you want, you could actually just press enter here. And then we're going to define the parameters that are required to fill in the properties of this worker class. So this is going to seem really obvious, but don't overthink it. The properties that we need to initialize this worker is its job title, which is of type string. So this is going to look a lot like kind of like the function parameters. These are actually not a whole lot different. So we're going to want the job title. We're obviously going to want the job description. And we're going to want the salary. So we've got, it seems like we kind of copied ourselves here, right? You might be wondering like, well, why are we just writing this over again? Well, this is a very simple class, and all that we're going to want to do is just define its title, its description, and salary for now. In the future, there will be things that you don't need to just copy the properties one for one to initialize the class. I don't want to confuse you with what that means right now, but I mean, in a case where we had something like the gas mileage from the last functions lesson, what we could do is we could maybe have a gas mileage property, but we don't need to pass in the gas mileage to actually define that. All we would really need is the miles traveled and the gallons used, and then it could set those properties, and then it would also be able to set the gas mileage without you actually passing it in. Maybe this could just do it itself. Don't worry about that too much. We'll come back to that in a little bit. For now, though, basically what we need to do is we need to say self.jobTitle equals job title. So real quick, what that means is self.jobTitle is this guy right here, and job title is this guy right here. So if we want to refer to a property of this class, we have to say self, which obviously makes sense. Like self.jobTitle, my job title is the job title that you gave to me. So we could do that, and then we could say self.jobDescription equals job description, and self.salary equals salary. And this warning here should go away because we initialized all properties. Cool. So this is kind of just like some boilerplate code for initializing a very basic class. We just need to define the properties, we need to pass them into the initializer, and then we need to set them on the class. So that's pretty much it with that. That's as simple as it's going to be. So cool. Now we have a class, and we can now create one of these classes. So we can say as a variable or as a constant. So we could say var person equals worker, and we can pass in their job title, their job description, and their salary. So let's say that this first person, their job title is a doctor. Their job description is to heal people. And their salary is probably pretty nice. Let's say they've got a $200,000 salary, maybe, let's say. Okay, cool. So now this is kind of your first taste of like object-oriented programming. If you haven't heard that, that's a term you're going to hear. Basically, all that means is we're going to base our programming off of the idea of creating objects and accessing their properties and telling those objects to do things. So let's kind of just go down here real quick, and you'll remember from some of the last videos, we were accessing certain properties like double.py. That was a property in, I think, the last lesson. And before that, I think we were looking at array.count. That .count was a property. Well, now that you've created your own class, you can also access properties of this object. So this person right here has a lot of properties that we've set on them. So if we start typing person dot, you'll see those properties that we added to this worker class. So if I just put job.title and I ran it, you're going to see doctor right here. Really cool. Person.jobDescription. If we run that, you're going to see to heal people. And lastly, if we put person.salary and we run that, we get their salary right here. So that's pretty cool. So that's how to create a class and access its properties. Now, we're not done yet. Classes get a whole lot cooler than that. It's not just that they hold properties. They can also have functions inside of them that can do things. So let's create a function real quick, and let's call it, let's say greeting, right? And this is not going to be a return function. This is just going to be a regular void function, so func greeting. And let's print something, and let's interpolate a string. You're probably noticing I like to just keep repeating on these terms a lot and keep trying these things out. The more we do them, the more they're going to stick. So let's print. You know what? Before we even do this, let's add one more thing that I totally forgot to add. Let's add a name property up here. So name is going to be of type string. That makes this worker a little bit more personal. And then here in the initializer, we're going to need to add that. And then we're obviously going to need to set it. Okay, cool. So now I've got the name. So now with this greeting function, we could say, hi, my name is, and then we can inject the self.name property. And then we could say, I am a self.job title. And then we could say, my job is to, and then we could insert that job description. And then we could say, I make salary per year. Okay, cool. So that's the greeting. So there was a lot in that one, but it's basically going to say something to the effect of, hi, my name is Cole. I am a software engineer. My job is to program things for people, and I make $10 per year. So cool. That's all that I make, guys. Don't make a whole lot of money. So anyways, just kidding. We're on track to get you and all of us making a whole bunch of money. So hopefully this is a big number here. Anyways, so now this is complaining because we added that name property, but we're not passing it into this worker here. So it's saying I don't have everything I need to initialize this worker. So let's go ahead and add that. The name, we'll just say, is Billy Bob. Okay, so this person's name is Billy Bob. Their job title is doctor. Their job description is to heal people, and their salary is $200,000. And lastly, if we came down here and just did that name property again and ran it, let's just make sure everything's working, and it looks like we're good. We've got our worker. His name's Billy Bob, doctor, to heal people, $200,000. Okay, cool. So we're off to a good start. Now we just added this function. So what's cool about this is we can come down here now and say person.greeting. And that's going to run this function. And if it wasn't clear already, by having a function inside of a class, you are able to access all of the properties of that particular class. So when we run this, it's going to be able to spit out this sentence and say, hi, my name is Billy Bob. I'm a doctor. My job is to heal people. I make $200,000 per year. So we notice there's a couple little grammatical errors in here. The first one, I think, is that we put a period here when we didn't need to, and we also didn't actually put like a dollar symbol or pound symbol or whatever it is from wherever you're at. So we'll add that, and let's run that again. Hi, my name is Billy Bob. I'm a doctor. My job is to heal people. I make $200,000 per year. Might be weird if somebody actually met you in real life and told you that, like, hey, this is how much money I make. That'd be kind of weird. Anyways, but not weird for this example. This is just what people do in this fake world. So anyways, so now I've got that greeting. So now go ahead and create another one. You can create whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and create one with you here, but go ahead and make whatever person. Make yourself maybe. Make whatever it is that you do now. Let's create another one. I'm going to call it Cole because that's me. And I'm going to create myself as a worker. My name is Cole James. My job title is software engineer. My job description is to write code. And my salary is $10 per year. And then I'll give you just a couple seconds to finish that up if you're not done writing it yet. And by the way, we haven't talked too much about this, but let's just make sure that when you're doing this, we're paying good attention to basically the syntax. We haven't used that word a lot, but the syntax, that's just the word we use to describe the way that this language is written. So let's just make sure if you're running into little errors, it might be because you're missing the little colon here after the name of the property, or you've got a comma missing right here, or maybe you spelled one of these properties wrong or something like that. Let's just make sure that if we're running into some problems, that's what we're paying attention to. One more thing before we move on from this particular example. You might be wondering why I put like spaces in the places that I do. Why not just do something like this? Well, technically we could, and it's not going to care about that because, again, Swift doesn't really care all that much about white space. But it's just not really consistent with my particular coding style, and not really consistent with a lot of people's coding style. For a lot of people, adding logical spaces to things just makes sense. It makes it a little bit easier to read. It makes everything not so compressed together, and it just kind of separates things from each other, so a little bit easier to read. So Anyways, that's kind of why I do that. But again, it's not absolutely necessary. Your code's not going to break if you don't do it. It's just a nice little thing to do to make your code a little bit more readable. So now that we've created our little person class, or our worker class, excuse me, now we could call Cole.greeting, or whatever you called yourself, whatever you called the variable. And now I've got, hi, my name is Cole James. I'm a software engineer. My job is to write code, and I make $10 per year. Cool. So now you're kind of starting to see what we could do with functions. We're going to go ahead and pause this video. We're going to pick up in the next one, but I don't want you to close this window yet. Go ahead and save it if you're going to come back to it later, or go ahead and just jump into the next video, because in the next video, we're going to be talking about extending classes and inheritance, and basically how to give these classes just a little bit more functionality. So anyways, with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.